David Brown here from Shooters Union. Good evening.
Hi, Graham Park here from Shooters Union.
We will, yeah, first thing I'd like to sort of roll with as a generic statement, the the amount of enthusiasm from members and the increase in membership largely because of the work that we at Shooters Union have been doing, but the members have been doing. And I consider every member to have a job, and their job is Shooters Union advocate. So they're advocating for what Shooters Union stands for. They're advocating for their own um, firearm um, world that they live in, whether it's a professional or a sporting or a collecting or whatever. And your advocacy work is to grow membership so that we have the resources to fight harder. And we're going to talk a lot tonight about some pretty big successes and how we're spending money wisely. And it's only possible because good folk like yourselves have been taking your friends to the range or taking your range friends and signing them up. Um, it has been quite considerable, and there's even been quite a large volume of people donating a little bit here and there, some people a lot. And this has been over the last 6 months, so post Bondi. Um, we're going to talk a lot about, the repercussions of that shortly. But I just wanted to, from us, and understanding, I don't get paid to do this. Graham doesn't. Most of the folk don't. We have a few paid staff and contractors. So we really do try and use the money wisely. And we just appreciate the fact that you all trust us to do what we do, because if you weren't, we'd be going backwards at a very rapid rate of knots. So anyway, we've got a few minutes in, and hopefully the numbers have logged in. We'll pass it over to our President Graham Park, and he can kick off the first segment of the webinar. All yours, Graham.
Thanks, David, and welcome everyone. And I just want to second what David said. None of this would be happening members, without members. That'd be David and I at his place grumbling over a glass of something and achieving nothing. So it's because of the members and the membership support. And I think it's really important to understand with Shooters Union, it's very grassroots driven. And you're going to hear later a lot about a survey that you're going to see tonight after this call. And then tomorrow, you'll see it in either right at the end of the call or on your email or tomorrow sometime for members about future directions and things because we really need your input. And as we go through tonight, I'll talk a couple of things that were really member initiatives, not ours, but they've turned into really big things. So, David, we'll kick off. David and I are just going to chat back and forth a little bit. I mean, we talk all the time, and then we'll continue to about this stuff. But we'll start addressing what's happened since Bondi. I mean, basically, what happened, we all know the horrendous events that happened there. We don't need to go through all that again and glorify terrorists. But what happened afterwards is, in its own way, horrible, which was where politicians, at least in federal level and New South Wales, immediately turned on legal firearm owners across the country and attacked all of us in a disgraceful thing that effectively put firearm owners next to terrorists. And it's absolutely bloody disgraceful. And they should be ashamed of themselves. They talk about un-Australian. That's about as un-Australian as I've ever seen something happen. And every one of them that voted for that stuff should be ashamed and why don't they just retire from politics? Because if they're willing to treat a million Australians like that, what are they willing to do on other subjects about it? I mean, we won't get into party stuff so much, but it was pretty horrendous display. So what did we do? We reacted very quickly, and I think one of the things that David and I are always impressed with is how fast Shooters Union is able to react to things. We were out and about doing things within the day, literally, and it went on from there. we've done a number of things. I'll get to this economic report, but I think, David, we've spent quite a bit of money, apart from the time and effort and living this thing since then, fighting with state and federal governments or working, I should say, working with them. Because in some cases, we haven't been fighting with them, we've been very cooperative with them. In fact, conversations I had with the Victorian Premier's office recently were very um, productive, I felt. And certainly that's been that way in Queensland and some in South Australia. So, and I know our Tasmanian reps had some productive conversations down there. But I'm not sure, David, but I reckon we'd be getting close to $500,000 we've spent of members' money since Bondi.
It'll be awfully close. And to be fair, this is ongoing.
Yeah.
In fact, Graham and I both said back in early January, the war just began, the political war just began, and this is a 2-year project. Um, we don't want to harp on too much, but you know, in the coming 12 to 18 months, 500,000's only going to be the beginning. We do have some good alliances with CIFA and a few of the shooting organisations. But
We've done some good work with SSAA National Office.
yeah, Tom
Um,
Kenyon's been very helpful.
And so I think if we looked at it today, David and I, like within days, we were seeing this and our whole board saw this. And I would suggest that the guys at CIFA and Tom Kenyon that would agree completely. This is effectively a 2-year war,
Mm.
that we're in for the future of firearms ownership in Australia because we were brutally attacked by the politicians, your rights, your property. And now what's happened, we're 6 months in, we've lost some battles like New South Wales when they passed the legislation and the feds, but we've won a lot of battles. South Australia, Victoria, we've run to some degree battles there. Queensland and Northern Territory, we've certainly won some. Tasmania's a work in progress. But no one really, other than New South Wales, is going along with this. 6 months in, David, I'd say on the batting score, we're doing pretty darn well for the outlay we've had. And when I said that amount of money earlier, I'm not talking about wages for staff. I'm talking about that was pure advocacy money that would not have been spent that way, except that. And that's why we run Shooters Union on the smell of an oily rag, so that when an emergency arises, we can get on with it. So we want to run through a little bit where we're at and then where we're going. We decided in board meetings early on that this was a really unprecedented attack on firearm owners. It was in many ways worse than the 1996 one, and it certainly has far worse ramifications when you start limiting numbers, when you start doing other things. It will eventually come back to having nothing. So it was serious. We've taken it seriously and we've gone to bat. We'll go through, but we also decided we've got to do things outside the box. There's that old joke about what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Well, David and I and the rest of the board decided let's do some different things. And one of these was suggested, well, actually, two of them that we're going to talk about tonight was suggested to us by members. The first being an economic report. For all the gun laws and the nonsense in Australia around, overt fear around firearms, no one has ever done, no creditable economic research firm has ever done a study into the costs and benefits of this sort of legislation. They're talking about caps and buybacks or I know they're not buying it back, they're stealing it and giving you money, but because they never owned it, you own it. Someone comes to your house, takes your TV, and leaves $1,000 on the counter. You still didn't give them permission. But with all that in mind, no one's ever really looked at the costs and the benefits. So we hired one of Australia's premier economic firms that does reports for governments and for major industries, and we had them do an economic report into.
Just to point out quickly, Graham, just for everybody listening, these are not cheap.
Hmm.
But the reason we use the right people is you can't be blown away as coming up with some bogus report.
No.
So this was the thing in Victoria that really sort of smacked him between the eyes.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say when we were talking with people in the Premier's office and they saw who had done the economic report, suddenly, because I think they
Credibility.
thought we'd sort of written it out on the back of a envelope. And when they realised it was some of Australia's top economists in it, and that what it said is that this was going to cost hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in the first year to the Victorian taxpayer, who's already broke, thanks to what they've done there, and on that it would return nothing. In fact, it talked about if you use the economist's calculations, a return of less than 1 cent in the dollar. If you use the government's calculation, a return of less than 10 cents in the dollar. Normal, reasonable standards for public policy is you get $1 of social benefit back for every dollar it costs. They're talking about in this getting 1 cent back. It's not viable, it's damaging, it does nothing, and it does not improve public safety. And we clearly showed that. You can fully, anyone that's on here and wants to read that full economic report, I believe there's a link available to it on our website. If not, just send an email to our office and they'll get you one. But we have published it. We've put it on Facebook. It's out and about. But we presented that to the Victorian government. We are currently working with other groups on another economic report for New South Wales. These have had big impact. I mean, we got major stories in the Australian and other media about that economic report. And as David said, it made an impact because with politicians, we can yell at them all we want, but unless we give them something concrete to go, hey, if you say no to these anti gun extremists, here's some really good data as to why you're actually correct and they're not. And that has an impact, and we believe it's going to have a major impact in New South Wales because the numbers are dramatically bigger than New South. Do you want to touch on anything on that,
Yeah,
David,
I
before we move on to?
just had a thought,
Yep.
and you and I have discussed this, but for our members, the significance you just touched on the fact that this got picked up, and unlike things that happened back just not long after Bondi, got picked up by the Australian newspaper. I'm going goosebumpy thinking, like, how much money would you have to spend to get a full front page spread
Yep.
or whatever out of the Australian? And this got picked up and it got noticed. And the most important part about this, even if you did have to pay a ton of money, and obviously the report cost plenty,
And it
the
did. The
most
report
important
itself
thing
was
is
for the
who's
Victorian
reading.
one was around $60,000 just on its own.
Is that right? 60 for Victoria. So the most important thing is not that, Fred having his cup of coffee in the middle of, I was going to pick some, yeah, Toorak in Melbourne. Um, That's not the target market. Although Fred may well have read that and thought, that's interesting. I don't want the government wasting my money. The most important thing is all the political elites, and that's
Read that.
MPs, ministers, premiers, prime ministers,
All
and
the
their
staffers and
staffers,
advisors.
all the party heavyweights, and the folk that are, in the background donating money and the power brokers for both sides of politics, or nowadays all three corners of politics. Um, they're the ones, that's the target market. And Graham and I had phone calls from senior political people a few months back
Yep.
that we never hear from, congratulating us on doing certain things. That tells you that these things are actually being noticed. So I think
They're,
the underlying thing is this has worked.
they're seeing you guys, our members, our organization as creditable, and they're coming to us for with questions, advice from all sides of different parts of politics, and some very surprising ones on some days. Now, I do want to touch on this next thing, David, and I'm going to have a guest come on here in a minute. Um, our solicitor, David Neuendorf, if he's on there, Sandra, and you can bring him up somehow where we can see him, that would be really good. I want to give
This
you an
is,
update on the Royal Commission.
I was going to say,
And
this is spectacular. And Graham, you might even want to talk about the member that put us up for this. But the most significant thing is no shooting organisation either A, has ever done anything like this before, and B, certainly didn't think about doing it now.
no.
And last of all, at first, we had no clue how to go about it either. So, anyway, it was a member suggestion. I'll let you tell the story because they came and approached you.
Exactly. As did the economic report. It came from a member as well. And this one came from a member in Brisbane who's a professional guy, and a lot of his shooting buddies are lawyers and people who've been around High Court and Royal Commissions. So when he heard and they heard there was going to be a Royal Commission, he jumped on me about we got to do this, we got to do this. And I said, no, why would I do it? I don't grumble. I didn't want to, I could not, honestly, I couldn't see it. He sat down and sort of thumped me around. I said, let me get our solicitor on a call. And then we got on a conference call, and immediately David Newnorth saw the value. We then engaged a barrister to look further into it, and then engaged what in Queensland we call a KC, what they call a SC in New South Wales. It's King's Counsel in Queensland, it's Senior Counsel in New South Wales. It's the same thing, it's just they've got different names. David, are you out there somewhere?
Yes, Graham, can you hear
Oh,
me?
there he is. We can see him. Everyone on the call, David Neuendorf, who's based in Brisbane, is the solicitor that many of you have relied on for QCAT challenges and to other things in courts around firearms issues. He's done an incredible job. He's a bit modest, I find, but out of 300 some odd cases, I think he's lost two or three, and he doesn't like to admit he even lost them. So he's the same guy you want on your side when there's a problem, but he's been exceptionally good with his advice to us. And I was just saying, David, how I was originally not a fan of this idea, and I think David was kind of this way as well on this Royal Commission. And maybe you tell us a little bit about why it's important. I mean, no shooting group had ever done it or thought to do it. No shooting group has ever appeared before any Royal Commission in Australia. So I'll turn it to you, David.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Graham, and thanks, David, for giving me the opportunity to explain what's been happening, I guess, behind the scenes in relation to the Royal Commission. Graham, as you know too well, this hasn't been something that's transpired overnight.
No.
After the member came to Graham, I think it was back in early February, we had an initial meeting with Graham, myself, that member, and I'd already engaged a junior counsel based in Brisbane, basically just to discuss what the Shooters Union Australia potential involvement could be in the Royal Commission. Initially, back then in February, when we were engaged, we didn't know what the direction the Royal Commission was going to take. It was still very early days because the interim report hadn't yet been released. However, in preparation, Graham, you gave us the go-ahead to engage the junior barrister, and then obviously we engaged the senior counsel who was based in Sydney, purely just to have the finger on the pulse, I guess, and just to prepare and be ready for the next event. Now, that next event was in late March when there was the release of the interim report. Now, after that was released, it became apparent that there was room for involvement for the law-abiding shooters of Australia, and particularly for the Shooters Union Australia, who a day in, day out navigate the licensing regimes throughout the entirety of Australia. So once that was portrayed to myself and to the barristers involved, it really looked like there was an opening of an opportunity for the Shooters Union to become involved. And that's purely because the interim report doesn't just comment on anti-Semitism and social cohesion. It also commented on firearms licensing and regulations generally. Obviously, what transpired in the past in relation to the licensee, but also what reforms there were going to be in the future. So On behalf of the Shooters Union Australia, we then filed an application for leave to appear at the Royal Commission. Now, the average person might think that's a straightforward step, but I mean, it's quite a significant achievement for the Shooters Union Australia to be granted that leave. So we were granted leave by the Royal Commission to appear. However, only insofar as it relates to weapons licensing, because obviously there's a lot of other matters that are being discussed at the Commission. It's important to note that part of the leave submission that we were focusing on was to basically focus on any potential reform, because the Shooters Union Australia, the submission made it very clear that their perspective needs to be taken into account, and that needs to be represented, because practically and how that's to work at ground level needs to be taken into account. It can't just be recommendations made that aren't really considered properly. And Graham, you said it before, the Shooters Union Australia is, as far as I'm aware, the only licensing or weapons-based group in Australia that have been granted leave to appear in the Royal Commission so far. And as you said, Graham, and as we've said through plenty of meetings along the way, it is important that the voice of the law-abiding firearm user in Australia does get taken into account.
Yeah. I think it's important, David, to also note that both CIFA, the industry group, and
Yes,
WSAA National supported us wholeheartedly once they learned of this and actually attended the event with us and were really generous with providing data and information.
And that's what I was going to next, Graham. So just so the members understand, the way the commission works, it happens at different hearing blocks, and at each hearing block there's different issues and different witnesses. So we were given leave for the current hearing block, which is about 2 weeks ago, and we were given leave for one of the witnesses to cross-examine that witness. Now, as you said about WSAA and CIFA, they were supportive of the application for leave in the first instance, but they were also very supportive to you, Graham, and the Shooters Union Australia during the process, because having us appear in Sydney wasn't just as simple as appearing. We needed to have a significant background of how it works on a day in, day out basis, particularly the New South Wales licensing system. So in the process of taking instructions, we prepared some very comprehensive briefing notes that we then gave those briefing notes to the Commission. And as far as we are aware, we've provided significant assistance so far to the Commission, both in the open and in the closed court hearings, about the matters relating to weapons licensing. So it's all been extremely positive so far. There's obviously a scope for a lot more involvement, which we don't yet know what the future looks like. But I mean, from my perspective, it's a significant achievement that the Shooters Union has come this far. And as you said before, Graham, the only group in Australia who has put their nose in, and as we've made it pretty clear, to be of assistance, not to be an enemy or an opposition, but to be of assistance and to try to help out, just to make sure that if there is reform, that it is balanced.
Yeah, I think that's very key. Some people think, oh, go in there and give them heaps. No, it's not like that. We're going in there to assist them in becoming to a good outcome, a positive outcome for everyone, a practical outcome. And I believe, as David just said, we've given really valuable assistance and documentation to them on a number of subjects around licensing that would not have been seen from that perspective. And I think that's critical. And David and the legal team he put together have just been fantastic.
And it's obviously just a good opportunity just to be involved in and just to see how it unfolds there. And just for, as you said, Graham, for the Shooters Union to be announced in the Commission as being there as a party to the proceedings, and obviously the support that you got from those other two entities was also of great assistance. But I mean, as for moving forward, it's still early days. We don't know who the next hearing blocks are going to be. So it's obviously a day-by-day process. However, a lot of the hard work in preparing has now been done for, the background, the interim report. It's just about trying to stay involved from now on in.
Well, thank you for all your work on this, David. And for anyone watching, especially if you're in Queensland, if you have issues around licensing and things, David's details are on our website. We always recommend him. If you remember, he'll have a quick chat with you. Won't cost you anything to find out what the situation is, and then if it's worth going forth or not. And that we do have a legal fund if for some unusual cases, sometimes we actually help members a little bit more. We already pay in any state, we will pay the fees to go to QCAT or NCAT. Well, you can't do that anymore in New South Wales till we fix that, which we'll get to next. But in the other states, we'll pay the filing fees, which in Queensland are, I don't know, several $100s now, isn't it, David, to file?
About $389, I think,
Yeah,
last time I
which is
checked.
about 7 or 8 years worth of your membership. So it's a pretty good deal if you do. And David's there to be supportive. So thanks very much for taking time from your evening, David, to come along.
Hey, thanks, Graham. Thanks, David, and thanks for the support and the opportunity. Thank you.
And just finishing up on that, Bax and Associates, the company that David works with, they do other stuff other than firearms. So, you know, maybe houses, wills, estates, I don't know, all sorts of other things. David's company is certainly a friend of Shooters Union members. So.
Thank you, David. Okay, moving along from the Royal Commission, let's look at some election updates, both past and coming. South Australia, we saw a fantastic outcome in South Australia. No, it didn't change the government, but that wasn't really the intent. What we saw was really for the first time ever, a third party, One Nation, get some seats in the lower house, a total of 7 seats. I remember I interviewed Corey Bernardi a few days before the state election there, and Corey off camera was thinking, they'd get probably 2 upper house seats, maybe 3 if everything went perfect, but no lower house seats there. They got 7 in all. It was an incredible result, and I think that has sort of sent a shot across the bow, so to speak. The South Australian government is not keen on making these federal changes, whether they make some changes or not, but they're certainly not making noises that way. We then moved on to the Farrer by-election, which is a huge thing. And many of you on there may say, who cares about a by-election? This one you cared about because you had the former opposition leader for the country who'd resigned a seat, spat the dummy, wasn't going to run in a seat that has been held continuously by either the National or Liberal Party since that seat's founding, and threw it out into a by-election. Well, the by-election turned out that the first 2 people on the vote, the first one was David Farley from One Nation, and the number 2 was an independent. So out of it, all the voters were really obviously not wanting the status quo. And we get an on-the-ground overview of that tonight because David Brown here went down and moderated or emceed that meeting. And we held a Meet the Candidates night in Albury. We had 7 or 8 of the candidates attended. David will tell you about that. But a resounding success. And David, do you want to just speak to that event, why we did it, what you saw, what the feel on the ground was?
Yeah, the whole evening was a come and meet the candidates. It was open to anybody in the Albury region, and we booked out a large portion of a big venue, and there was standing room only. So that was interesting. It wasn't just 30 or 40 Shooters Union members that turned up. We had every candidate bar the Liberal candidate who allegedly had something else committed at that time. A bunch of independents and the not so independent, who was a teal in sheep's clothing. We had tremendous support. A lot of you through social media would follow the work of Topher Field. He lives in that electorate and he volunteered to basically, I would say he was the compere. It was great working with him. It was just like, Karl Stefanovic or someone like that running the event. So it wasn't just about shooting, although obviously us putting the event on that was a significant topic. But the point was to get many people that were influential, maybe through the community, along to this event. And it was extremely well supported. I don't know what the final numbers were, but it was huge. And we had a very, very good response. And certainly David Farley and the anti-uni party, as it's been called, position became very, very clear on the night. And me standing off on the sidelines looking out at the people, you could tell just listening to their questions and just watching their facial expressions, there's a political change going on in the country. And since that by-election, certainly other candidates would be far more positive in their aspirations going forward. Certainly those on the One Nation side of things. But it's certainly, National Party is certainly on notice. Liberal Party
I
is
think
certainly
it's
on
fair,
notice.
David, to say that it was amazing to me when even though I wasn't there, when I listened to it, the whole meeting, that every candidate that came along really did not want a bar of what the federal government was doing or what New South Wales was doing, from the Teal Independent to the
Yeah.
One Nation to the Nationals. I think it's fair to say they were all saying, no, this is wrong, and I would repeal it. And I thought that was pretty impressive when you see a range of political views, and they were all agreeing that what New South Wales had done was outrageous and what the federal government had done. And I think that's the lesson, because whilst it was a federal by-election, it was held within New South Wales. And I think it gives us a very good indicator of the sentiment in a lot of New South Wales areas as we go forward. And we'll talk more about New South Wales in a minute. I just want to jump to Victoria, David. As we talked about, we did that economic report. We presented that to the Premier's office about 10 days before they came out with their decision on what they were going to do or not do. Now, Victoria has an election in, I think, late October. And so that's going to be very interesting. That we've been working closely down there with the National Party of Victoria, who are opposed to any changes that would badly affect shooters. We've also been working with the One Nation guys down there, and they are certainly of the same mind that way. And there's a Shooters Fishers member down there, exactly the same. So when we're working with different people down there, we're not picking one party. We will work with any party that is willing to be sensible around gun laws. And going to New South Wales now, we've got an election in New South Wales in roughly 9 months in March. And this is the big one, because as David said at the start, we've won a few things, and you've got round the country the Prime Minister's idea of this national steel back, national removal of guns, national changes and more restrictions on everything. It's really has not gone over very well at all, and the general public sees it for what it is, a misdirection away from dealing with terrorism. And the general public does not like, the idea of wasting the money, hence our doing economic reports, when they don't like them not focusing on the terrorism. And I think there's that fair go thing in Australia, and I think it's happening with shooters right now. They're going, fair go, mate. 30 years you've been telling us we got the world's toughest, best, greatest gun laws. Now we have one incident, and instead of blaming the terrorist, you blame some farmer with a shotgun. Fair go. And I think there's a lot of that out there, and I think the media lately is showing it. Just in the last couple of days, David, you've had the Australian Federal Police Union chief, who is normally fairly anti-firearm in comments, saying about laws, the laws were rushed, knee-jerk reaction, and that these caps and things won't necessarily do anything. That's a big win. And then we saw Labor on the weekend, New South Wales Labor, put up a poll or a petition online and promoted it heavily around social media, and they managed to reach an astonishingly high number of people signed it. Um,
8. I
by the
don't know
way,
whether it's gone
one
any
of those
higher.
was our a media advisor who wanted to see what all the question, how it was laid out. So it was really one less. That's pretty embarrassing. And but within 2.5 days, they took the counter off it, so you couldn't see who'd signed it, how many people had signed it. I think that's telling us some things. Even we have had discussions with several New South Wales Labor backbenchers who are rightly concerned that they're under fire in their own electorates for something that they didn't really want. New South Wales, David and I talked about at the start that we see this as a 2-year war to stop these guys, and we're 6 months in. Just because we're winning a few battles, now's not the time to slow off. Now's the time to put the foot on the accelerator and go hard. Any of you that have got a military background knows just because the other side's hurting a bit, you don't let up. You keep pushing because people can see that we're not unreasonable. We don't want people with guns in the wrong hands any more than anyone else, but we don't want to be treated, and we will not be treated as, mere victims for politicians. So our goal, and if we can get across, I guess, two things to you tonight. One is about filling out this survey. We really need your input. The other is that even though the majority of our members do not reside in New South Wales, we believe that for the next 9 months, we need to focus a lot of our attention on New South Wales. We've got 3 goals in New South Wales. First goal, repeal that legislation, not negotiate about it, repeal that legislation completely. 2, a change of government if they won't repeal it. 3, if we don't get the repeal, we don't get a change of government to damage every existing member of parliament that voted for that horrible law so badly that they don't want to hear the word gun for the next 10 years. They want to hear therapy when they hear the word firearm. And that's what we want to do. In doing that, we've actually hired a professional political campaign manager just for New South Wales. He lives in New South Wales, works out of Parliament, does all these things. He will be helping us with strategy and guidance on that. And that will lead us to the first event that will kick off. In a way, what David did in Farrer sort of kicked off New South Wales because it gave him the info he needed. But David will be up Penrith on June 23rd, 7 p.m. at the Panthers Leagues Club. We will be holding a live meeting to talk about the state of play in New South Wales. Why is it June 23rd? Because that's budget day in New South Wales. And we will have some information of our own to release on budget day relating back that might get some media and other things. I'll leave you a little bit in suspense with that, but David's got some really juicy stuff there at Penrith, and you'll be able to book. When you see the survey, it'll have a link in it that you can book for the event. It might even be here. Oh, that's for the survey. If you're looking at this and you want to get in the survey before it's sent to you, you can take a thing on your phone of the what do they call those things? I'm showing
QR
my
code.
Hmm?
QR code. And while we're
QR
talking
code.
about it,
It
Graham,
shows how hopeless I am with technology, everyone. But
you still haven't gotten past the high-tech ear tags for the cattle, have you?
that's right.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with electronic ear tags on cows.
So what I'd like everybody to do here is this survey and the event in Penrith. You might be a Queenslander, but I'll guarantee you know 3, 4, or half a dozen or
Yeah,
more people, and particularly sort of closer to Sydney is probably better.
that's right.
Everyone in New South Wales, get them to do that survey. We want to know, and we want to have good quality data. It's not going to be their personal information or anything. It's going to be good quality data that we can go and, either
If
beat
you look
up.
at it and you think it's a bit long or something and it's asking stuff, hey, if you don't
Bear
really
with
don't
us.
want to do it, don't do it. But if you will, it's really helping us. It doesn't go anywhere. It's just for us. So we get all that information and we can go forward. And when we talk to a politician in New South Wales in the next few months, we're going to have data saying, well, we found 300 people in your electorate that said this or whatever. So feedback's really helpful. We see New South Wales as critical because even though the Prime Minister's federal thing seems to be stumbling a bit at this stage, New South Wales legislation is in place. And whilst there's no regulations, nothing's around that yet. We'll talk about that in Q&A at the end. But we need to get that repealed or vote anyone out who voted for it and support those who voted against it and support those who will vote against it. We won't just be taking their word. We'll be getting an in-writing commitment from parties. And I believe in New South Wales there's at least 3 parties that will completely oppose the legislation that's in place. And that is the National Party, One Nation, and Shooters, Fishers and Farmers. They will all, I believe, oppose it and agree to repeal it if they're in. There's a lot of back and forth within the Liberal Party. We'll see what they want to do. I think they were probably misled a bit by Labor, a bit silly of them, but maybe they'll see the light before the election. But Penrith, if you're in that area, that's great. Come along. You better book. There's no cost. Come along, and we'll have a bunch of guys down there. It'll be a fun time, and get in and do that survey, please. It'll be sent to you on your email and stuff. But as we share this out, we wanted to put that QR code on there. Also, I just found out about an hour ago that we now have merch. We never had merch. Everyone said to us, these shirts that David and I have, there's about 6 of them out there that we got for those of us that get out and talk. You got, I think you organised them. But we're now going to have hoodies and T-shirts. If you just go onto our website and visit store, you'll see a whole section with them there. And they've got logos and things, locked, loaded, and not backing down. And that's particular for New South Wales. Don't apologise for your existence there. We're going to turn this around. And as we turned around, there's a lot of embarrassed faces of idiots that went along with this, and they're getting more, they're looking sillier by the day. And so let's all stand up, get along, do that. And for those of us outside New South Wales, it's critical we break that. If we leave that in place and go, oh, well, our state doesn't have that, who cares? It will spread like a cancer. There's just no question. It's spread from West Australia, but there's not much we can do there because of the politics of the situation. New South Wales, very, very different. That government is only there by a thread right now. So it doesn't mean it'll get back in, or that it won't get back in as a minority government that won't be forced to repeal stuff. So anyway, and there's merch there for those that like that.
Yeah. On that topic, Graham, just before we go,
yes,
the merch stuff.
Q&A. Yep.
The locked and loaded one's a limited edition.
Oh, yes.
I'm actually thinking my credit card might be coming out later tonight because I definitely, in fact, I think I'm going to wear that at Penrith. What do you reckon?
That'll be good.
On the plane and all. So that will be a limited edition. And there are going to be a change of things over time. So this is going to be a living dynamic thing. And the proceeds of that are going to go into our, correct me if I'm wrong here, Graham, but it's our Protect Your Guns Fund.
Yeah,
We've got
Save
our
Your
legal
Guns
support
Fund. 100% of any profits we make from merch will go into that.
So, and that funding gets sort of more focused spending, as in different from other spending.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think there's drink coolers. There's a whole bunch of things that are
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The stubby holders are really important because I see one person on the call who seems to spend his life traveling countries trying every sort of beer. We won't say his name, but he's waving.
He's the official global beer tester of Shooters Union.
I think so. He'll need extra stubby coolers. We'll send him a complimentary one for his efforts in beer tasting.
If he buys 12.
We got a bunch of questions. We're going to whip through a few of them. Some of them repeat, so excuse us if we go through them fairly quickly. We'll knock them back and forth between the two. I'll start out with this. I've got one. The payments in WA for buybacks were too low. How is it government's allowed to practice what's basically theft? A very good question. Under the Australian Constitution, the federal government has to give you what's called fair market value if they confiscate things. However, none of the states are obligated legally. The state constitutions apply when something is within the state. And so West Australia, like every other state, had no obligation to give you 1 cent for your property. They could have just said surrender it by X time. And I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just telling you how the law is. They did a very small payment in order, I guess, to try and shut some people up. I don't think it worked very well. How is it that they're allowed to practice what's based theft? I don't know. I think it's entirely wrong and it should be changed. But the only way you're going to change that in West Australia is change who the government is. David, you take this one. Which state governments are likely to change their current firearms laws and when do you think?
You give me the hard one. Let's see, my crystal water glass here says, for the moment, and actually this is probably the most important part of this answer. For the moment, Queensland looks okay, but you cannot just write that off. I would say no state is safe. Some are just slightly less dangerous than others. So Western Australia, that's a political problem. That's got to be fixed at the ballot box. South Australia, Victoria, making all the right noises, as Graham talked about earlier. Queensland, we really need to keep supporting pro-gun candidates and MPs in Queensland. To keep reminding them that, what they did was the right thing.
Of whatever party.
Yeah, New South Wales is interesting. There is half a chance this could get blocked, and
Yep.
this is going to answer someone else's question, so we won't do that later. It may just find that they come to caretaker mode and haven't been able to achieve it, which means the government changes in any significant way, the act won't be able to be implemented, or this is my understanding. Is that correct, Graham?
Correct.
So there's
If
still
you
half
look,
a chance for New South Wales that it might get blocked.
yeah, New South Wales, other states really, the Northern Territory is not open to any change. So the other states, Tasmania's a bit up in the air, but we'll see. The problem they've got, it's a minority government, and Labor has vowed to bring in all this stuff from opposition if they can by conspiring with the Greens and others. But if you look at New South Wales, the word is that they won't have the and this will answer a lot of you. We've had a number of questions. What about this in New South Wales? What about that? They have not written the regulations, so none of it is in force. The only part at all that's in force is that the weapons registry in New South Wales, if you've already got more than 4 or more than 10 guns, depending on the type of license, they will not issue you another PTA at the moment. That's all they're doing. Don't seem to be doing much actually as far as productive, but that's all they're doing because there's no regulation. The law in essence has not changed because the regulations aren't written, so they're not enforced. They're not even enforceable until you get the regulation. And they're not looking at doing that till probably end of September or October. Then they won't be able to even start the confiscation program, the so-called buyback, until probably January, February, when, as David says, they may well be in caretaker mode, which means it won't be able to start until right at the election or afterwards, which is kind of funny because...
Makes it a good election topic.
Well, it does. Anyone that thinks that firearms won't be a major election subject in New South Wales is kidding themselves, and we're going to make sure it is one. So that's kind of an answer to that.
That's probably all. Suppressors is a good question. We've got that a couple of times, actually, particularly on Queensland, because we almost...
Yeah, well, Queensland, effectively, you can't get them. Whereas in New South Wales, you can get them some of the time, although they're getting stricter again for whatever reason. The ACT is pretty reasonable about them. Unfortunately, the LNP government in Queensland has said they will not do what Labor had promised, which was to do a 12-month trial of suppressors, at least for use in agriculture, and see how it went before they did anything else. We, of course, are discussing with them. We think there should be a 12-month trial. We will keep pushing that. I don't know what success we'll have, but we will certainly keep you informed. There's one here: pressure the government to again allow import of stripper clips, moon clips, and speed loaders and things. I think that one's very in the very unlikely basket in the short term, but probably very likely to be changed in the longer term, as in 1 or 2 years. Also, for those of you out there, any of you that are around a trade or something, it creates a massive opportunity to manufacture them in Australia. Most of them are very simple, and anyone with a modicum of 3D or traditional manufacturing could make them. There is no law against making them. There is no law against selling them. Not one state that I'm aware of has stopped them or anything. It's purely an importation issue. So you could go your hardest and sell them. And if you come out with some good ones, send us a sample. Dave and I'll try her out. And if they work well, we'll encourage everyone to buy from you, being an Australian made product. That's about all
Interesting.
we can say on that one.
Interesting today, Graham. I spoke to a chap in an advanced manufacturing industry environment who was doing R&D and machining work on what looked like AR platform, either bolt action but also semi-auto. So we've already got like the wedge tails
Yep.
and the likes. I think that whole, Victor Precision, for example,
Yes.
the
There's a
Australian
lot of small
manufacturer.
guys out there that could make some of these things quite
Yeah,
easily at reasonable cost. It might cost you $5 or $10 more than they would have when they were being imported in mass. But you know what? They'll probably be great quality and everything else. Here's a guy that's asking, the UK has just announced that Palantir will take over their firearms registry rather than each county administering, which is how it is in the UK. This Palantir is an AI surveillance company, according to them, and they do a lot of. I know they have a lot of military contracts. Is this a coincidence, or is it Big Brother style surveillance of firearm owners coming to Australia? Well, it's the UK that's done it. Um, I'd say they just picked a company that had put in for the contract, and they're privatising like I think they will do here. Is it a good thing? Honestly, I don't know enough about it to say. I wouldn't be that comfortable with them considering their links elsewhere, but I don't know enough about it.
I got one here, Graham,
Yep.
because we are sort of just about to run out of time.
Yes.
Someone's
Oh,
made
yes,
a
we are.
comment. Someone's made the comment, multiple state police Facebook pages are posting photos of seized items, often gel blasters, etc., or illegally 3D printed things, often indistinguishable to most people, leading to public misinformation. Now,
Yes.
we understand that they're toys or they're illegal things. The narrative suggests blah, 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 it's becoming widespread. I would suggest to everybody watching this, whenever you see any government organisation expanding on the truth or, you know, um, publishing stuff that is not true. I remember 5 or 6 years ago, a drug bust with all these guns that were seized, like, drugs, cash, guns. But I know for a fact all those guns were locked up in safes in a Keddard storage vault in Townsville. So the police are not always honest with all of the material that they publish. I'm not going to say that they're
Well,
deliberately
I would say the police media office.
the media office. Well, they're still that's probably the better thing. But we often see these things. I would encourage everybody to politely, and I say politely, stand them up on it and call them out on misinformation because
Yeah.
that is an issue. Misinformation is an issue, particularly in the media and the widespread media. So I think pretty much everything else we covered through all the other discussions,
I
but
do, and we are out of time. We said we'd do this in under an hour, and we're going to
we're
stay
going
with
to do
that.
it.
I want to thank once again all of you for taking time from your evening. We've tried to go through as much as we can, but as members, you drive our direction. So please, when you get the survey, if you live outside New South Wales, it'll probably take you about 4 minutes. If you live in New South Wales, there'll be extra questions, might take you 8 minutes. But take the time, do it as much as you can. It really gives us direction and confidence because we are out there hopefully doing what you guys feel is effective. It's what we think is effective for firearm owners, but we want to hear from you. And we especially want to hear in New South Wales about changing that horrendous legislation and getting rid of it. Not chipping away around the edges. Can you have 4 guns or 5 guns? Who cares? Because they'll change it again next year and shrink it. This has got to be gotten rid of, the whole concept. And I honestly think that us together with other groups and firearm owners from all different walks of life can do that in New South Wales, which will send a message across the whole country and will affect positively shooters in every part of the country. Thanks so much for being on, and thank you, David, for all the work you've been doing, and look forward to seeing those of you in New South Wales, if you're out Penrith way, to being there. Why Penrith? Because it's also the most marginal Labor seat. And so we thought that was a nice little hello message to the government there. Just being friendly, that's us.
So thanks very much. Remember, you're all advocates. Get out there and spread the good word, sign people up, get people licensed, lift our numbers. That's how we'll win this game. And get behind everything that all of our initiatives and particularly New South Wales. Come and see us, but share that QR code. Thanks very much, everyone.